Hello there. I want to talk today about options for sharpening hand tools if you're on a really tight budget. This is pretty much where I'm at most of the time. The first thing that I would say is if you're getting into woodworking, you're going to see guys out there that are spending a lot of money on tools. And they will make you think that you have to. And so you can look around and see and go, well, I can't afford that, and just decide not to get into woodworking. But what I would tell you is this. If you look at this channel, if you look at the very beginning of this channel, where I began by building a woodworker's bench, that is the base for this channel. Everything I do is on that bench. Almost. There's some stuff I do indoors, but 90% of the stuff I do is on that bench. Okay? If you look, I built that bench mostly with cheap Harbor Freight, a cheap 1-inch Harbor Freight chisel. Okay? The Woodworker set, but it's cheap. Okay? And you'll see on this channel that I use the cheap Aldi's chisels. Now, I've got some vintage stuff as well, and vintage is good stuff. If you're looking at old vintage chisels and stuff like that, and you can get them cheap, most of the time you can, but they need love. They need repairing and sharpening and all that. I got videos on this channel how to restore some of the tools that I've used, like old hand planes and stuff like that. You don't have to spend $70 for a chisel. I spent like $6 or $8 on that Harbor Freight Harbor Freight set, and I think I got like 6 or 8 chisels out of it. And as long as you keep them sharp, they work just fine. All right. You might have to sharpen them more because the steel is not as hard, but sometimes that's a blessing. Because sometimes you can get some of these newer steels, some of these chisels with the newer steels, they won't take as shallow of an angle, which is important in my opinion for paring and stuff like that. And won't hold an edge. You have to come up to like a 30-degree angle with them. But people use them for that all day long and don't have any problem. Don't get me wrong. But for my preference, I prefer the old steels, the old simple carbon steels. The old vintage stuff because they're easier to sharpen. But what I'm telling you is that you can take, as long as the tool, and I can't speak today, excuse me, but as long as the tool is reasonably made, as long as you can sharpen it and keep it sharp, it'll work. All right? You might have to stop and sharpen it a little more often, but it'll work. And the proof is on this channel, and there are a couple other woodworking channels on here. That Wood by Right is another example. If you look, he uses the Harbor Freight chisels all the time, okay? Or the Aldi's, I'm sorry. The Aldi's chisels, no, it's the Harbor Freight. Or maybe both, but he uses them all the time, okay? He does fantastic work. So you don't have to spend $70 or $60 or $40 per chisel. All right, and that's just something that it relates to this, because once you get a tool, then you have to keep it sharp, right? Well, the general woodworking stone set you'll see a couple of things. You'll see things like diamond plates. They can be expensive. You can get them fairly cheap, but a set of them will set you back a bit. All right, or you see like water stones. They can be expensive, but you don't need all the water stones they're telling you need. You can do it cheaper, and I'll show you a little bit of that here too. Or you'll see things like a progression of oil stones. They might start with an India or aluminum oxide stone in a medium or coarse grit for decades. One of these This is a Norton MB8. It's a medium India oil stone. It's about 240 grit. One of those, and one of these, which is a black Arkansas, that you're going to pay in this size right around $100 for. This was a gift. It's the only reason I've got it. Alright? But one of these and one of those India oil stones was the go-to for decades and decades for all the woodworkers, all the old guys. That's what they used. Something like that, or a translucent arc. Something like that. And if they wanted to, what they might also do is put a soft in between that. They would go from the India to a soft Arkansas stone, and then to this black. They put a phenomenal edge on a stone, on a chisel or plane blade. And I use Arkansas, that medium India, and this soft Arkansas stone here regularly in honing my chisel set. But what if you, I mean, this is $35, this soft Arkansas, so that's not bad. But remember I said, and this right here, you can get one of these new for $30, something like that. So $65, $70. Because the thing of it is look, I can come off of that India and go to a soft, alright, and then go to a pasted strop. What a pasted strop is, it's a piece of wood that you've made flat and true with a plane, and you've got a piece of leather that you glue on top of it, and then you go down to Harbor Freight or your local hardware store or whatever, and you get this. It's a crayon. This is chromium oxide, and it's a very fine polish. And if you if you take this, come off of it, and go to one of these, and then go to a pasted strop, pasted with this, that'll give you an edge that'll do anything you want to do in woodworking. One other thing that I would say, while we're talking about Arkansas stones, if you look at this stone, you see the surface of this stone is really matte. Well, if you flip this over, I don't know if it'll catch it. I'm going to try. But that surface is pretty shiny, right? It's burnished, and there are videos all over the internet talking about this. And what effectively that does is it gives you a soft Arkansas stone, and then it can give you, depending on the stone, because they're all natural, they're all different, but that might give you something like a hard Arkansas, not as hard as that black, but hard enough. And what you might do is you might come off of that India and go to the matte side of this stone, and then go to this stone for a final polish before going to the chromium oxide. And that might give you just a little bit more. But the thing of it is if you're shaving hairs off your arm smoothly, that'll do what you need doing. My collar likes to ride up like Dracula, excuse me. But that'll give you what you need doing for any kind of woodworking that you want to do. So for roughly under $100, you could get, for $35, you can get one of these. For $35 or $40, you can get one of these. What is that? $75. Boom. Spend $4 or $5 on a tube of this. Find some scrap leather and some scrap wood, or just get you a piece of 2x4 pine, or 2x6, or whatever width you want. Make one side of it perfectly flat and smooth, and paste that. You don't have to have leather. You can use wood. Balsa wood stripes are used all the time, but pine works just fine as long as it's smooth and flat. Alright? So for $80, All right, you have a woodworking kit. Okay, well, what about if you don't have $80? Because I can tell you right now, when I first started this thing, $80 was hard to come by, and $80 is still hard to come by for me. So what do? Well, the first thing I would address is, if you're buying old tools or new tools and you're buying cheap ones, then you're going to have to correct some of the geometry issues and some of the problems that these tools will have. They're not going to be as finely finished. They're not going to become as sharp or anything like that as the more expensive tools. So sometimes you might have to grind a bevel. Well, what do you do that with? The first thing you can do is, again, get you a flat piece of wood, put some 60 grit on it, and that'll grind the snot out of a bevel. You can move some steel fast doing that. Alright? And then graduate to something like a medium India oil stone or a smoother type stone. One of the other things you could do, what I would say, well, first of all, your discount tool store in your neighborhood, they're going to sell something like this. And this is an aluminum oxide stone. It's a cheap Chinese stone. And they'll tell you that it's coarse on one side and fine on the other. Don't believe it. This side's about 90 grit, and this side's probably like 125, so they're both coarse grit. But I mean, you could get one of these stones with a little bit of oil, or what I recommend on them, on the oil stones, is a mixture of water and dishwashing liquid. And you can vary the amount of dishwashing liquid you want in it to change a little bit of the viscosity of it to what you want. But I would recommend that on your Arkansas stones and your oil stones rather than oil. It's cleaner. It's doesn't have any stink to it. It's not going to contaminate any other kind of stones like your water stones, stuff like that. So, but if the stone has been used for decades and somebody used it for oil, you'll have to soak it in something like Simple Green for 4 or 5 days to soak out and leach out all of that oil that's built up in the stone and clean it before you can do that, but it's worth doing. But anyway, one of these, cheap though it may be, remember, you're just moving a lot of steel right now because you're trying to grind a bevel, you're trying to correct a bevel, you're trying to flatten something, that kind of deal. You're flattening the back of a chisel, you're flattening the back of a plane blade. It's not like you need super fine grist for that or a super fine stone. One of these will work just good for that, and I paid like $2, and it's a 2x8. Alright, so to start with, you can use that sandpaper, or you can get one of these to move a lot of steel quickly. So what about intermediate? Well, I mentioned that soft Arkansas you can find for like $30-35. What I would tell you is look at thrift stores, flea markets, places like that. The antique stores, you got to watch, because some of the antique stores, the guys think they got $1 million worth of stone, all right, and it's worth like $20. So flea markets, thrift stores, that kind of deal. And at a flea market, now this stone, I bought this stone years ago. It's a soft Arkansas. It's a 2x4. A little bit over 2 inches, I believe, by 4. And this is a good intermediate stone. It's the same as this stone. Same type. It's just smaller. Now what that means is that you'll have to use shorter strokes, and if you've got a wide blade, you're going to have to can it a bit so that you can get it all on the stone. Alright? But you can find these kind, or I have another here that's a bit narrower, but it's still a soft Arkansas. At thrift stores and flea markets, I asked the guy how much this was. It was in like a basket full of junk. He said, just take the thing. Alright? So Also, you can look at stuff like, all right, this stone, for instance. This is either aluminum oxide or carborundum. For purposes of this discussion, that don't matter. For purposes of what I'm going to use for, I don't care. I'm going to put some soapy water on this and go to town. Now, this is about 150, 120, 150 grit, something like that. That'll work too. This is a similar stone. It's bigger. I think I paid $2 for any of these here. Okay, it's a simple stone. It's thicker. Same kind of deal. This is about 240. This is about the same thing as this right here. It's just a 6" by 2 instead of an 8" by 2. Right? And depending on the brand of stone that you buy, and I'm talking quality stones, not junky stuff, all right, Norton and others, the color will be different. It doesn't matter. It'll do the job. That's the thing, is what you got to do if you don't have the money to buy new stuff, is you've got to look around. You've got to look around at the thrift stores, look and see if you, at the flea markets, look and see, hey, will that stone work? One of the things that you can do is it's not just the feel of the stone, although you should be able to tell a bit about the feel of the stone, but it's porosity, all right? For instance, okay, that's about a 240 grit stone, right? Well, there's a Arkansas, a soft Arkansas. You can look at the surface of the stone. Or, for instance, this is 140, about 120, 140, and this is around a 240. And the way that I determined this was I honed something, I sharpened something, looked at the scratch patterns, and compared them to a known stone, in this case my India stone, my Norton MB8, that orange stone that I showed you. And I know that this is about 150 grit because it was much coarser than this, but not so coarse to be in the 100 grit, the 80 grit or 60 grit range. So it's right around 120, 150, something like that. But look at the difference in the porosity of the surface. Between the two. So just look and feel, and you know what? Sometimes you're just going to take a gamble, all right? But if the stone will work for a tool, it'll work for a knife. Doesn't make any difference. If they're $2, $3, $5, you're not losing much, if any, all right? Another thing that I would say is keep on the lookout for it. Like this stone here, this is an old piece of slate that I found. A friend of mine actually gave this to me. This will put a fine edge, almost as fine as one of those black Arkansas. Alright? On a tool. You might find a stone like this. If you find something like this, this is good and heavy, and it's really, really smooth and very, very silky to the touch, and you can see there's a hint that it's natural. You see the saw marks there. But you see the difference in the surface of that stone. You might run across something like this. This is a conical. It's a Belgian mined stone. This is been used to fill. You don't use this side unless this side happens to kind of be purplish looking. This is schist, it's junk stone. But this is the conical side. If you find something like this, at a flea market, thrift store for $30, $40. Well, $30. This is probably about a $40 or $50 stone. But if you find something like this for $30, $20, grab the son of a gun. It'll put a wonderful finish on your tools. Similarly, you might find something like this. This is another piece of slate. This is called a Thuringian. And this actually happens to be labeled, let me see if I get it right. You won't be able to tell what the label is, but it's got a label on the back of it. This is an Escher brand, but it's just a piece of slate that comes from like Germany or someplace like that. And this is a fantastic finisher. I got this stone for $1. If I was to sell this stone, it would be worth $100 or so bucks, okay? So the point that I'm making is, look around. Look. Use your eyes and your ears and your brain, and you can find stuff that you can use to hone with, to sharpen with, that don't cost you a whole bunch. And the thing of it is anytime you get into anything that you want to do, your success is determined by how badly you want to do something. If you want to do something, it don't matter what it is, your determination, if you're determined enough, you can find a way. All right? All of these stones, you can find them pretty cheap. There's one more option that I would say to you for intermediate stages. You might use this stone to move a lot of steel quickly, or you might use that sandpaper or whatever. But you can find a stone like this. This is made by a company called King, and it's a combination stone. This side is 1,000 grit, and this side is 6,000 grit. And I can come off of one of these lower grit stones or one of the intermediate stones, like I would come off of something like this, that medium India, or this, which essentially is the same grit, and go to the 1,000 grit until all the scratch marks and stuff are gone and it's decently shiny, and then polish on the 6,000 side. Now this is water stone, so you want to use water, and this side here you have to soak, so you have to soak the thing for 20 minutes or so in water before you use it. But these are fine stones for tools and for razors and other sharpening needs. They're used an awful lot, and I don't ever use this side anymore because I have other stones for the intermediate steps. But a lot of times, instead of going to my black Arkansas, or instead of going to that piece of slate or something like that, I'll go to this, I'll just spritz this with water because it's a splash, what they call a splashing go. I can just spray water on it or pour water on it and then start honing on it, or sharpening, as we would say, and use that as a final finisher before I go to the chromium oxide. Doesn't matter. The point that I'm making, and you can get this stone new, brand new, with a holder, a stand to set it in for like $35 off of Amazon. And it's well worth that money. Well worth that money. Okay. So, if you want to get into woodworking and you don't have the money, don't worry about it. There are options. Just determine beforehand that, look, this is something I want to do, so I'm going to find a way to do it. That's the deal. Today, everybody kind of wants stuff handed to them. They want everything explained beforehand. They want to cross every T and dot every I and all. Dude, just jump in. Jump in and do. That's how you learn, is you jump in and you do. And the thing of it is, you can find options out there. There are ways that you can sharpen your tools and keep them sharp. One of the things that I do, like on the bench, when I'm working wood with a chisel or something like that, is every half hour, 45 minutes or so, I'll just go to a pasted strop. I'll chuck this up in my vise, hit this about 50 times, the tool on this, and go back to working wood. Your tool will, after you do that, as long as you don't dull it so completely that you have to go back to a stone. But if you stop every 30, 40 minutes and do that, if you're working in hardwoods, stop every 20, 30 minutes, all right, then you'll have a tool that will consistently shave your arm hair, and it'll shave wood just as well. It'll work for you, and you can keep moving. And that's the thing it's just maintaining, paying attention. What it is you want to make sure that you just keep a sharp edge on that tool. So, alright, thank you for watching. I hope this helps somebody, and I'll talk to you later.